The Chronicle of Peru by Pedro Cieza de León, a Spanish conquistador and chronicler who lived from 1520 to 1554. Translated to English by Clements R. Markha for the Hakluyt Society of London, England. Chapter 11. Of the cacique Nudibara, and of his territory, and of other caciques subject to the city of Antioquia. When we entered this valley with the licentiate Juan de Video, it was scattered over with very large houses of wood thatched with straw, and the fields were full of all kinds of food. In the hills several delightful rivers rise, whose banks were covered with many kinds of fruit trees, with very tall slender palm trees, thorny, with a bunch of fruit called pixibes growing at the top. They make both bread and wine from this fruit, and when the tree is cut down, they take from it a good-sized palmito, which is both sweet and wholesome. There are also many trees which we call aguacates, guavas, and very fragrant pines. The lord or king of this country was one named Nudibara, son of Anunabi. He had a brother called Quinicu, who was then his lieutenant over the Indians that lived in the mountains of Abibe, which we had just crossed, and in other parts. This lieutenant supplied his lord with many pigs, fish, birds, and other things from that land, and sent him gold and apparel as tribute. When the lord went to war, he was followed by many people with their arms. When he traveled through the country, he sat on a litter inlaid with gold, which was borne on the shoulders of his principal men. He had many wives. Near the door of his house, and the same thing was done at the houses of his captains, there were many heads of his enemies whom he had eaten, which were kept there as trophies. All the natives of this country eat human flesh. There are many large burial places which must needs be very rich. They had, in the first place, a great house or temple dedicated to the devil. At the time that the captain Francisco Caesar entered the valley, the natives rose in arms near that house or temple, thinking that, as his followers were such bad Christians, they might easily kill them. Thus, more than 20,000 Indians came out to war with much noise, but, although the Spanish party numbered no more than 29 or 30 horse, they showed so bold a front that the Indians fled after the battle had lasted a long time, leaving the field in possession of the Christians, and on this occasion Caesar certainly showed himself to be worthy of so great a name. Those who may write respecting Carthagena will have plenty to say of this captain, but it will not behove me to write more concerning him than is necessary for the clearness of my narrative. If the Spaniards who entered this valley with Caesar were not numerous, they certainly all became rich, and got plenty of gold, but, afterwards, when we came, the Indians concealed their gold by the advice of the devil, as they themselves affirm. Before these Indians gave battle to Captain Caesar, they took their gold to the temple which they had built, according to their own account, in honor of the devil, and, when the Spaniards came there, digging in a certain part, they found a vault with the entrance towards the setting sun, in which there were many vases full of very fine ornaments of gold, altogether more than 21 quintals, worth upwards of 40,000 ducats. They related that further on there was another house that contained more treasure, and they also stated that they found others still more rich in the valley. Afterwards, when we arrived with Video, we found the burial places opened, and the house or temple burnt. An Indian woman, who belonged to one Baptista Cimbron, said to me that after Caesar returned to Carthagena, all the lords of these valleys assembled and performed sacrifices, when the devil appeared in the form of a very fierce tiger, which in their language is called guaca, and said that those Christians had come from the other side of the sea, and that soon many more would arrive to occupy and take possession of the land, and that they must prepare for war. He then disappeared, and the Indians began to prepare, first taking a great quantity of treasure out of the burial places. Chapter 12. Of the customs of these Indians, of their arms, and of the ceremonies they perform, and who the founder of the city of Antioquia was. The inhabitants of these valleys are brave amongst themselves, and much feared by their neighbors. The men go naked and barefooted, and merely wear a narrow band fastened to a girdle round the waist. Their hair is worn very long. Their arms are darts, long lances of black palm, slings, and two-handed clubs, called macanas. The women wear a mantle from the waist downwards of bright-colored cotton cloth. The lords, when they marry, make a sort of sacrifice to their gods. They assemble in a house to the number of about 12, where the prettiest girls have already been assembled, and choose those they desire most. The son of the chosen woman inherits the lordship, and if there is no son, the son of the lord's sister inherits. These people border on a province called Tatabe, which is thickly inhabited by rich and warlike Indians, whose customs are the same as those of their neighbors. Their houses are built over very large trees, and are made of many stout poles, each house having more than 200 of them, and the coverings of these great houses consist of palm leaves. Many Indians live in one house, with their wives and children. These nations extend to the westward as far as the South Sea, and to the east they border on the great river of Darien. All their country is mountainous, very rugged and fearful to pass through. Near this country they say there is that grandeur and wealth of the Dababy which is so celebrated in terra firme. In another part of the country, over which Nudibara is lord, there are some Indians living in a certain valley called Nor, which is very fertile. Near this valley is now built the city of Antioquia. In ancient times there was a large population in these valleys, as we judged from the edifices and burial places, of which there are many well worth seeing, being so large as to appear like small hills. These Indians, though they speak the same language as those of Guaca, were always engaged in wars with them, so that the number of both nations has greatly diminished, for they eat all those that are captured, and place their heads before the doors of their houses. They go naked like the others, except that the chiefs sometimes cover themselves with a long mantle of colored cotton. The women are covered with small mantles of the same material. Before passing on, I wish to relate a truly strange and wondrous thing. The second time that we returned through these valleys, when the city of Antioquia was founded near the hills which overhang them, I heard it said that the lords or caciques of the valley of Nor collected all the women they could find from the land of their enemies, took them home, and used them as if they had been their own. If any children were born, they were reared with much care until they reached the age of 12 or 13, and, being then plump and healthy, these caciques ate them with much appetite, not considering that they were of their own flesh and blood. In this way they had many women solely to bring forth children, which were afterwards to be eaten, and this is the greatest of all the sins that these people commit. I saw myself what occurred between one of these chiefs and the licentiate Juan de Vidillo, who is now in Spain, and if he is asked respecting what I now write, he will say that it is true. It is that, when I and my comrades entered these valleys, a chief named Nabonuco came to us peaceably, and brought with him 3 women. When night came on, 2 of them laid down on a mat, and the other across it to serve as a pillow. The Indian then made his bed on the bodies of these women, and took another pretty woman by the hand. When the licentiate Juan de Vidillo saw this proceeding, he asked the Indian chief why he had brought that other woman whom he held by the hand. The chief replied, in a gentle voice, looking him in the face, that he was going to eat her. On hearing this, Vidillo was astonished, and said, "What? Are you going to eat your own wife?" The chief, raising his voice, replied, "Yes, truly, and I will also eat the child she bears me." This happened in the valley of Nor. I have heard this licentiate Juan de Vidillo sometimes say, that he had heard from some old Indians, that when the natives of Nor go to war, they make slaves of their prisoners, and marry them to their own relations and neighbors, and that the children thus born are eaten, and that afterwards, when these slaves are too old to have any more children, they eat them also. In truth, as these Indians have no faith, I am not astonished at this. Owing to these wars, when we discovered the valleys, we found so many human heads at the doors of the chiefs' houses, that it seemed as if each one had been a butcher's shop. When one of the chiefs dies, the people mourn for many days, cut off the hair of his wives, kill those who were most beloved, and raise a tomb the size of a small hill, with an opening towards the rising sun. Within this great tomb they make a large vault, and here they put the body, wrapped in cloths, and the gold and arms the dead man had used when alive. They then take the most beautiful of his wives and some servant lads, make them drunk with wine made with maize, and bury them alive in that vault, in order that the chief may go down to hell with companions. The city of Antioquia is situated in a valley between the famous, notable, and rich rivers of Darien and of Santa Martha, for these valleys are between the 2 cordilleras. The position of the city is very good, with wide plains, near a small river. Many other rivers flow near it, which rise in the cordilleras, and many springs of sweet and limpid water. All the rivers are full of very fine gold, and their banks are shaded by many kinds of fruit trees. Antioquia is surrounded by extensive provinces, inhabited by Indians, very rich in gold, who use small scales to weigh it, but they are all great eaters of human flesh, and when they take each other prisoners, they show no mercy. One day I saw in Antioquia, when we founded it in some hills where Captain Jorge Robledo first fixed the site, which was afterwards changed by Captain Juan Cabrera to the site where the city now stands, while walking in a field of maize, 4 Indians close to me, who met another, and killed him with their clubs. They then drank his blood and eat his entrails by mouthfuls. They have no arrows, nor do they use any other arms than the above. I have never seen any temple or house of worship, except that which was burnt in the valley of Guaca. They all talk with the devil, and in each village there are 2 or 3 old men who are adepts in the evil art of conversing with him, and they announce what he desires to be done. They do not entirely attain to a belief in the immortality of the soul. The water and all that the earth produces is referred to nature, although they well know there is a creator, but their belief is false, as I shall relate presently. The city of Antioquia was founded and settled by the captain Jorge Robledo, in the name of His Majesty the Emperor Charles, King of Spain and of the Indies, our Lord, and by order of the Adelantado Don Sebastian de Belalcázar, his governor and captain general of the province of Popayán, in the year of the Nativity of our Lord 1541. This city is in 7 degrees of the equinoctial, on the north side. Chapter 13. Of the description of the province of Popayán, and the reason why the natives of it are so wild, and those of Peru so gentle. As the captains from Peru discovered and settled in this province of Popayán, they speak of it as a part of, and one with, that land of Peru, but I cannot consider it in that light, because the people, the land, and all other things in it are different. This province was called Popayán from the city of Popayán, which is in it. It is 200 leagues long, little more or less, and 30 or 40 broad, in some parts more, and in others less. On one side it has the coast of the South Sea, and some very high rugged mountains to the westward. On the other side are the main cordilleras of the Andes, and between these mountains rise many rivers, some of them being very large, forming broad valleys. One of these, which is the largest in all this land, is the great river of Santa Martha. The towns of Pasto, Popayán, and Tamana are included in this government, and the city of Cali, near the port of Buenaventura, besides the towns of Onzurma, Cartago, Arma, Antioquia, and others which were founded after I left the country. In this province some parts are cold and others hot, some healthy and others pestilential. In some parts it rains much, in others little. In some parts the Indians are cannibals, in others not. On one side it borders on the New Kingdom of New Granada, on the other, on the Kingdom of Peru. To the west, it is bounded by the government of the river of San Juan, to the north, by that of Cartagena. Many have wondered how it is that these Indians, having their dwellings in positions exposed to invasion and, except in Pasto, the country being neither too hot nor too cold, but in all things convenient for conquest, should be so untamable and obstinate, while those in Peru, with their forest-covered valleys, snowy mountains, and greater numbers, are so gentle and submissive. To this I would answer that the Indians of the government of Popayán are, and always have been, in a state of confusion, and they have never been ruled by a chief whom they feared. They are lazy and idle, and, above all, they detest being under subjection to any one, which is a sufficient cause for resisting the yoke of strangers. Another reason is to be found in the fertility of the soil, while in some parts there are dense forests, cane brakes, and other fastnesses, so that when the Spaniards press on these Indians, they burn their houses, which are of wood and straw, and retreat for a league or 2, making other dwellings within 3 or 4 days, and sowing as much maize as they require, which they reap within 4 months. If they are still pursued, they once more abandon their homes, and retreat, for wherever they go they find a fertile land ready to supply them with its fruits, so that war or peace are in their own hands, and they never want for food. The Peruvians, on the contrary, are docile because they have more understanding, and because they were subject to the king's Incas, to whom they paid tribute and whom they always served. In this condition they were born, and if any did not wish to obey, they were constrained to do so, for the land of Peru is full of mountainous tracts and snowy plains. If, therefore, they were to fly from their homes to these wilds, they could not live, for the land does not yield fruit, so that they must serve in order to live, which is quite sufficient reason to resolve the doubt. I now propose to pass on, giving a particular account of the provinces of this government, and of the Spanish cities which have been founded in it, and stating who were the founders. From the city of Antioquia there are 2 roads, one to go to the town of Onzurma, and the other to go to the city of Cartago, and before I relate what is worthy of notice on the road to Cartago and Arma, I will give an account of the town of Onzurma, and then return to do the same by the other route. Chapter 14. Containing an account of the road between the city of Antioquia and the town of Onzurma, and of the region which lies on either side of it. Starting from the city of Antioquia and traveling towards the town of Onzurma, one sees the rich and famous hill of Buritica, whence such a vast quantity of gold has been taken in times past. The distance from Antioquia to Onzurma is 70 leagues, and the road is very rough, with naked hills and few trees. The greater part is inhabited by Indians, but their houses are a long way from the road. After leaving Antioquia, one comes to a small hill called Carrom, which is in a little valley where there used to be a populous village of Indians, but since the Spaniards came as conquerors, the Indians have greatly diminished in numbers. This village had many rich gold mines, and also streams whence they could obtain gold. There are few fruit trees, and the maize yields small crops. The Indians are the same as those we had already met with, in language and customs. Further on there is a settlement on the top of a great hill, where there used to be a village of large houses inhabited by miners, who became very rich by collecting gold. The neighboring caciques had their houses here also, and their servants obtained a great quantity of gold. From this hill came the greater part of the riches which were found at Senu in the burial places, and I saw very fine gold in abundance taken from them, before we went to the discovery of Urut with the captain Alonso de Cáceres. When we discovered this village, with the licentiate Juan de Video, I remember that a priest who accompanied the expedition, named Francisco de Frias, found a totema, which is a sort of large glazed earthen jug, full of earth, and he sorted very large grains of gold out of it. We also saw here the sources whence they extract the gold, and the tools with which they work. When the captain Jorge de Robledo founded the city of Antioquia, he went to see these gold washings, and they washed a lump of earth, extracting a quantity of very fine grains which one of the miners affirmed to be gold, but another said it was not gold, but what we call marcasite. As we were on a journey, we could not stop to examine further. When the Spaniards entered this village, the Indians burnt it, and they have shown no desire to settle there again. I recollect that a soldier named Toribio, going to seek for food, found a stone in a river as big as a man's head, covered with veins of gold which penetrated from one side of the stone to the other, and when he saw it, he put it on his shoulders to carry it to the camp. As he was going up a hill, he met a small Indian dog, and when he saw it he turned to kill it for food, dropping the stone which rolled back again into the river. Toribio killed the dog, thinking it worth more than gold, such was his hunger, and thus the stone remained in the river where it was before. In another river I saw a Negro, belonging to the captain Jorge Robledo, wash large grains of gold out of a lump of earth. In fine, if the people were more docile and better conditioned, and not such eaters of human food, and if our governors and captains were more pious and had not ill-treated them, this province would be very rich. Near this village, which is on the top of a hill called Buritica, a small river rises and flows through a valley where there is a mining establishment formed by the same captain, Jorge Robledo, and called Santa Fe, which is subject to the city of Antioquia. The mines have been found to be very rich near the great river of Santa Martha, which flows close by the establishment, and during the summer the Indians and Negroes get much wealth from the banks, and hereafter, when there are more Negroes, they will procure more gold. There is also another settlement near the before-mentioned village, called Zindabe, inhabited by Indians with the same language and customs. Further on there is another village called Caramanta, the name of the cacique or lord of which is Coroma. Chapter 15. Of the customs of the Indians of this land, and of the forests that must be traversed in order to reach the town of Onzurma. The people of this province are warlike, and their language is different from the others we had met with. The country is covered in all parts by dense forests, and a broad river flows through it, swelled by many streams and fountains where they make salt, a truly wonderful and prodigious fact, and of it, as well as of many other things in this province, I will speak presently, when the narrative affords a suitable place. There is a small lake in the valley where they make very white salt. The lords or caciques and their captains have very large houses, and near the doors there are stout canes that grow in these parts, on the tops of which are placed many heads of their enemies. When they go to war, they take sharp knives made of reeds or flint, or of the bark of canes, which they can also make very sharp, and with these they cut off the heads of their captives. To others they give most terrible deaths, cutting off their limbs, eating them, and placing their heads on the tops of canes. Amongst these canes they place certain boards on which they carve the figure of a devil, very fierce, and in human form, with other idols and figures of cats which they worship. When they require water or sunshine for their crops, they seek aid from these idols. Those who are set apart for that purpose talk with the devil, and are great sorcerers and magicians. They believe in and watch for signs and prodigies, and preserve those superstitions which the devil suggests, such is the power he has over these Indians, God our Lord permitting it for their sins, or for some other reason known to himself. They said, When we first discovered the country with the licentiate Juan de Video, that their chief, named Coroma, had many idols of very fine gold, and they say that there is such abundance of that metal, that the chief can get as much as he likes from a certain river. These Indians are great butchers in the matter of eating human flesh. Near the doors of their houses there are small open spaces where they have their places of sepulture, according to the custom of their country, consisting of very deep vaults, with their openings facing the east. When a chief dies, they place him in one of these vaults with much mourning, putting his arms and clothes, the gold he possessed, and some food, with the body. From this circumstance we conjecture that the Indians certainly gave some credit to the thought that the soul leaves the body. The country is well supplied with provisions, and fertile, yielding crops of maize and edible roots. There are scarcely any fruit trees. To the eastward of this province there is another called Cardama, which is the limit of the discoveries of Sebastian de Belalcázar. The Indians are rich in gold, have small houses, and all go naked and barefooted, without anything more than a small band, with which they cover their shame. The women wear small mantles of cotton from the waist downwards, but are otherwise uncovered. Beyond the province of Cardama there is a forest, extending more than 7 leagues, and very dense, and here we suffered much from hunger and cold when we went with Video, and I may truly affirm that in all my life I never suffered such hunger as during that journey, although I have served in some expeditions of discovery in which we underwent great hardships. We found ourselves in so sad a plight in these dense forests, where the sun could not penetrate, without roads or guides, nor anyone to tell us whether we were far from or near any inhabited part, that we were inclined to return to Carthagena. It was a great thing for us to find that wood which I described as growing in the mountains of Abibe, for with it we could make a fire, as it will always burn whenever it is required to do so. By the help of God, and with the aid of our own arms, with which we forced a way, we got through these forests, in which we left several Spaniards dead from hunger, and many horses. Beyond, there is a small valley clear of trees, and a little farther on we came to a large and beautiful valley, very populous, with the houses all new and close to each other. Some of them were very large, and the fields were full of maize crops and edible roots. Afterwards, the inhabitants of this valley left their old home, fleeing from the cruelties of the Spaniards, and took refuge in some wild and lofty mountains, which overhang the valley called Chima. 2 leagues and a half beyond this valley, there is another small one, formed by a spur which runs out from the Cordillera, and here the town of Onzurma is founded, which was first called the city of Santa Ana de los Caballeros. It is built between 2 small rivers, on a rising ground, which is covered with beautiful trees, and fruit trees both of Europe and of the country, and excellent crops of beans. The city overlooks all the district, being the highest part of the rising ground, and no people can approach without being first seen from the town. On all sides it is surrounded by great villages, ruled over by many caciques or lords, who are all friendly to each other. The villages are close together, and the houses are divided from each other by short spaces. Chapter 16. Of the customs of the caciques and Indians in the neighborhood of the town of Onzurma, of the founding of that town, and who its founder was. The place on which the town of Onzurma is built is called by the natives Umbra, and when the Adelantado Sebastian de Belalcázar entered this province, as he had no interpreter, he could understand none of its secrets. He heard the Indians, when they saw salt, call it answer, and this is true, for among them it has no other name, and this is the reason that from that time, in speaking of the place, they have called it Onzurma, and have given this name to the town. 4 leagues to the westward, there is a village which, though not very large, is inhabited by many Indians, as it has large houses and broad lands. In the road to it there is a small river, and it is a league from the great and rich river of Santa Martha. These Indians had for their captain and chief a well-disposed man named Circa. He has, or had when I saw the place, a very large house at the entrance of the village, and many others in different parts. Near the large house there is a small court surrounded by the canes I have already described as having seen in Caramanta, and on the top of each was the head of an Indian who had been eaten. The chief had many wives. These Indians have the same language and customs as those of Caramanta, but are even greater butchers and eaters of human flesh. That the difficulties of the discovery of this country may be known, I desire to relate what happened in this village, at the time when we entered it with the licentiate Juan de Video. As the stores of maize had been carried off, we neither found that nor anything else to eat, and it was more than a year since we had eaten meat, except that of the horses that had died, and of a few dogs. We even had no salt, such was the misery we endured. At this time 25 or 30 soldiers set out to procure, or, to speak more plainly, to rob whatever they could find, and, near the great river they came upon some people who fled, for fear of being seen and taken prisoners by us. Here the soldiers found a great pot full of cooked flesh, and they were so hungry that they thought of nothing but eating it, supposing it was the flesh of creatures called cuis, because some came out of the pot. As soon as they had well eaten, one of them took out of the pot a hand with its fingers and nails, and they also found pieces of the feet and other parts of a man. When the Spaniards saw these things, they were troubled at having eaten of such meat, and the sight of the fingers and hands caused them much sorrow, but they returned to the camp, from which they had set out half dead with hunger. Many small rivers rise in the mountains near this village, where much very rich gold has been taken by these Indians and by Negroes. These Indians are friends and allies of those of Caramanta, but they were always at war with their other neighbors. There is a strong position in the village, which they garrison in time of war. They go naked and barefooted, and the women wear small mantles, and are good-looking, some of them beautiful. Further on is the district of Sopia, and between these two places there flows a river rich in gold, where the Spaniards have established some farms. The people of the last-named district also go naked. The houses are like those of other Indians, and within them there are great sepulchres where they bury their dead. They have no idols nor house of worship that we saw. They talk with the devil. They marry their nieces, and sometimes their sisters, and the son of the principal wife inherits the lordship, for all these Indians, if they are chiefs, have many wives. If a chief has no son, the son of his sister succeeds. This district borders on the province of Cardama, in going to which the great river is crossed. On the other side is the province of Pozo, of which we shall have to treat further on. To the east of Onzerma there are other large villages, full of fruit gardens and cultivated fields, whose chiefs are friendly. They are all allies, although at times there is enmity and war amongst them. They are not such butchers and eaters of human flesh as the others whom I have described. The caciques are very rich, and before the Spaniards came, they went about in hammocks and litters. They have many wives, who, considering that they are Indians, are beautiful. They wear handsome colored mantles of cotton. The men go naked, but the principal chiefs cover themselves with a large mantle. The women are dressed as I have before said, they comb out their hair, and wear very beautiful necklaces made of pieces of fine gold, and earrings. They also slit their nostrils and insert pieces of gold in the opening, some large and others small. The chiefs had many drinking cups of gold and mantles, both for themselves and their wives, garnished with pieces of gold, some round and others in the shape of stars. They call the devil Xarama, and the Spaniards Tamarica. Some of them are great sorcerers and herb doctors. Their daughters are married after they have ceased to be virgins, and they do not hold virginity to be a thing of any estimation. When they marry they use no kind of ceremony. When their chiefs die in a part of this province called Taya, they place their bodies in hammocks and light fires all round. Holes are dug beneath, into which the melted fat drops, and when the body is half burnt, the relations come and make great lamentations, drinking their wine, and reciting their songs of praise to their gods according to their custom, and as they have been taught by their elders. This being done, they wrap the bodies in shrouds, and keep them for several years uninterred. When they are thoroughly dried up, they put them into sepulchres which they make in their houses. In the other provinces, when a chief dies, they make a very deep sepulchre in the lofty parts of the mountains, and, after much lamentation, they put the body in it, wrapped in many rich cloths, with arms on one side and plenty of food on the other, great jars of wine, plumes, and gold ornaments. At his feet they bury some of his most beloved and beautiful women alive, holding it for certain that he will come to life, and make use of what they have placed round him. These Indians use darts, lances, and clubs, some of black palm wood, and others of a white wood which grows in those parts. We did not see any house of worship in their country. When they talk with the devil, they say that it becomes dark, and that one who is chosen from the rest speaks for the others. The country, where these people have their villages, consists of very lofty mountains without any trees. To the westward there is a vast forest called Chima, and further on, towards the South Sea, there are many Indians and large villages, and it seems certain that the great river of Darien rises there. This town of Onzerma was founded by the Captain Jorge Robledo in the name of His Majesty, the Adelantado Don Francisco Pizarro being governor and captain general of all these provinces, although it is true that Lorenzo de Aldana, the lieutenant general for Don Francisco Pizarro in the city of Cali, named the municipality, and appointed as alcaldes Suer de Nava and Martin de Amoroto, and as alguazil Mayor Roy Venegas, and sent Robledo to people this city, now called a town, ordering him to call it Santa Ana de los Caballeros. Thus some credit for the foundation of Onzurma may, for these reasons, be given to Lorenzo de Aldana. Chapter 17. Concerning the provinces and towns between the city of Antioquia and the town of Arma, and of the customs of the natives. Here I will cease from following the road which I had commenced, and, returning to the city of Antioquia, I will give an account of the road which leads thence to the town of Arma, and even as far as the city of Cartago. After setting out from the city of Antioquia to go to the town of Arma, the great river of Santa Martha is reached, a journey of 12 leagues. To cross the river there is a boat, or at least there is no want of materials for making one. There are few Indians on the banks of the river, and the villages are small, for the inhabitants have retired to a distance from the road. After traveling for some leagues a village is reached, which used to be very large. It was called the Pueblo Llano, but when the Spaniards entered the country, the natives fled to certain mountains which were little more than 2 leagues distant. The Indians are small, and they use arrows, which must have been brought from the other side of the Andes, for the natives of those parts have them. They are great traders, and their principal article of trade is salt. They go naked, the women wearing very small cloths from the belly to the thighs. They are rich in gold, and their rivers contain abundance of that metal. Their habits and customs are like those of the neighboring tribes. Beyond this village there is another called Mujia, where there is a great quantity of salt, and many traders carry it over the mountains and obtain in exchange great sums of gold, cotton cloths, and other things which they require. Further on I shall treat of this salt, how it is obtained, and how they carry it. Beyond Mujia, towards the east, is the valley of Abura, to go to which it is necessary to cross the Andes, which is done very easily as there is little forest, and the journey only takes 1 day. We discovered this valley with Captain Jorge Robledo, but we only saw a few small villages, different from those we had already passed, and not so rich. When we entered this valley of Abura, the detestation we conceived for the natives was such that we hung them and their women to the boughs of trees by their hair, and, amidst grievous moans, we left their bodies there, while their souls went down to hell. The land is very fertile in this valley of Abura, and several rivers flow through it. Further on there is a very large ancient road, and others by which the people communicate with those to the eastward, which are numerous and great, but we heard of them by common report, and did not know them from personal inspection. We next arrived at a village called Senasura, which is rich, and it is believed that there are here some very rich burial places. The Indians are fine men, they go naked like the others, and resemble them in their habits. At the village of Blanco, some distance beyond Senasura, we left the great river on the right hand, in order to go to the town of Arma. There are many other rivers on this route, which I do not enumerate, because they have not all got names. Near Senasura there is a river flowing over a very stony bed, and nearly a day's journey along its banks. On the left hand, there is a large and very populous district concerning which I shall presently write. These districts were at first placed under the city of Cartago, the great river forming the boundary, by Captain Jorge Robledo, who discovered them, but as the Indians were so untamable, and opposed to service at Cartago, the Adelantado Belalcázar, governor for His Majesty, ordered that these villages should be separated from Cartago, and that a town of Spaniards should be founded in the midst of them. This was done, and the town was formed by Miguel Muñoz, in the name of His Majesty, the Adelantado Don Sebastián de Belalcázar being governor of the province, in the year 1542. It was first founded on a hill at the entrance of the province of Arma, but the war which the natives carried on against the Spaniards was so fierce that, for this reason, and because there was little room to sow crops and establish farms, it was removed a little more than 2 leagues nearer the great river. The site is 23 leagues from the city of Cartago, 12 from the town of Onzurma, and 1 from the great river, on a plain between 2 small rivers, and is surrounded by great palm trees, which are different from those I have already described, though more useful, for very savory palmitos are taken from them, and their fruit is also savory, for when it is broken with stones, milk flows out, and they even make a kind of cream and butter from it, which they use for lighting lamps. I have seen that which I now relate, and it all comes within my own experience. The site of this town is considered rather unhealthy, but the land is very fertile. A fanega of maize yields 100-fold and more, and they sow the maize twice a year, and other produce yields in the same proportion. Up to the present time no wheat has been sown, so that I cannot affirm whether it will yield a harvest or not. The mines are richer on the great river, which is a league from this town, than in other parts, for if Negroes are set to work, a day will not pass without each man giving 2 or 3 ducats to his master. As time wears on, this will come to be among the richest districts of the Indies. The repartimiento of Indians which I received for my services was in the neighborhood of this city. I could wish to use my pen at more length on this subject, but the state of affairs will not permit it, principally because many of my companions, the discoverers and conquerors who set out with me from Carthagena, are without Indians, or only possess those which they have had to pay for, which is certainly no small grievance. Chapter 18. Of the province of Arma, of the customs of the natives, and of other notable things. This province of Arma, whence the town took its name, is very large and populous, and the richest in this part of the country. It contains 20,000 Indians capable of bearing arms, not counting women and children, or did so when I wrote this, which was at the time when Christian Spaniards first entered the country. Their houses are large and round, made of long poles and beams, which curve upwards from the ground, and the roof is of straw. In these houses there are several divisions, partitioned off by reeds, and many people live in them. The province is about 10 leagues long, by 6 or 7 broad, a little more or less, broken up into rugged mountain ranges without forest. The valleys are like orchards, being full of all kinds of fruit trees, such as are found in this country, besides a very delicious fruit of a brown color, called pitahaya. This fruit has the peculiarity of making the urine of those who eat it, even though it be only one, of the color of blood. In the hills there is another fruit which I take to be very curious, called voyas. It is small, and has a pleasant smell. Some rivers rise in the mountains, and one of them, called the River of Arma, is troublesome to cross in the winter. The others are not large, but, from their appearance I certainly think that in time they will get as much gold from them as they do iron out of Biscay. Those who may read this, and have, like me, visited the country, will not consider this statement fabulous. The Indians have their workshops on the banks of the rivers, and they are continually waging cruel wars against each other. The languages of the Indians differ in many parts, and almost in every hamlet there is a distinct language. They were, and are, marvelously rich in gold, and if these natives of the province of Arma were as intelligent and docile as those of Peru, I will be bound to say that their mines would not fail to yield more than 500,000 pesos de oro. They have, or once had, many rich ornaments of this metal, which is so fine as to reach to at least 19 quilates. When they go to war they wear crowns with beautiful plumes, with plates on their breasts, armlets, and many other ornaments. When we discovered them, the first time we entered the province with the captain Jorge Robledo, I remember we saw armed Indians covered with gold from head to foot, and the place where we first saw them is called to this day Loma de los Armados. Their houses are built on the level places at the foot of the hills, which are very rugged. They have large fortresses built of stout canes pulled up by the roots, which are placed in rows by 20s, like a street, and in the center they have, or had, when I saw the place, a high platform, well built of the same canes, with steps up to it, where they offered sacrifices. Chapter 19. The sacrifices offered up by these Indians, and what great butchers they are in the matter of eating human flesh. The arms used by these Indians are darts, lances, slings, and blowpipes. They are great lovers of noise, and when they go to war they take drums, flutes, and other instruments. They are deceitful and word-breakers, nor will they keep the peace they have promised. Of the war they waged with the Spaniards I will treat in its proper place. Very great is the dominion that the devil, enemy of the human race, is allowed by God to have over this people, by reason of their sins, and often is he visibly amongst them. On the above-mentioned platform they have many cords fastened in the manner of a net, each 40 brazas long, and we made use of these ropes for sandals. On the top of the platform they fastened the Indians whom they took in war by the shoulders, and cut out their hearts, which they offered to their gods or to the devil, in whose honor they made these sacrifices. Presently, without any long delay, they eat those whom they had thus killed. I saw no house of worship, but in the houses of the chiefs there were chambers well covered with mats and much ornamented. I saw one of these chapels in Pokhara, as will be mentioned further on. In the furthest end of it there was a recess containing many clay vessels for incense, in which they burnt certain small herbs instead of incense. I saw these plants in the land of a lord of this province named Yeo, and they were so small as hardly to rise above the ground. Some had a very black, and others a white flower. Their smell resembled that of verbena. These, with other resins, they burned before their idols. After they have performed these and other superstitious rites, the devil comes. They relate that he appears in the form of an Indian, with very bright eyes, and gives replies to the priests or ministers, to questions they ask him, concerning what they wish to know. Up to this time there are no clergymen or friars in any of these provinces, for the Indians are so evil disposed, and such butchers, that many of them have eaten the knights who possessed encomiendas amongst them. Yet, when they go to the Spanish settlements, they put aside their Gentile customs and vanities, and conform to our religion, receiving the water of baptism. And, God permitting, some chiefs of the provinces of this government have turned Christians, and abhor the devil, eschewing their former evil works. The people of this province of Arma are of middle height, and all dark-colored, insomuch that in color all the Indian men and women of these parts, where there is such a multitude of people as scarcely to be numbered, and so wide an extent of country, appear as if they were all children of one father and mother. The women of these Indians are the ugliest and dirtiest that I have seen in all these parts. Both men and women go naked, except that, to conceal their shame, they put a bit of cloth in front, a palmo broad, and a palmo and a half long, with which they cover themselves in front, for the rest they go quite naked. Some of the women go shorn, as do their husbands. The fruits and other provisions they have are maize and yuccas, besides many other nourishing roots, some guayavas, paltas, and palms of the pixiwares. The chiefs marry those women they most fancy, keeping one of them as the principal wife. The other Indians marry daughters and sisters of their neighbors without any order, and few find their wives to be virgins. The chiefs may have many wives, other men have 1, 2, or 3, according to their means. When they die, the chiefs are buried in their houses, or on the heights of the mountains with the usual ceremonies and mourning. The sons succeed their fathers in the chieftainship, and in their houses and lands. Failing a son, the heir is the son of the sister, and not of the brother. Further on I will relate the reason of this custom of the nephew who is son of the sister, and not he who is son of the brother, inheriting, in the greater part of these provinces, according to what I have heard from many of the natives. The Indians are so fond of eating human flesh, that they have been seen to take women on the point of bringing forth, quickly open their bellies with knives of stone or cane, and take out the child. Then, having made a great fire, they toast and eat it, together with the mother, and all is done with such rapidity that it is a thing to marvel at. For these sins, and for others that these Indians commit, divine providence has ordained that, though they are so widely separated from our region of Spain as to make it appear almost impossible to go from the one place to the other, yet that roads and ways over the mighty ocean should be open to these lands, where only 10 or 15 Christians together conquer and subdue 1,000 to 10,000 of these Indians. I do not believe, however, that this arises from our merits, for we are indeed great sinners, but because God chooses to punish these people by our means, and therefore permits these events to happen as they do. But to return to our narrative, these Indians have no belief, so far as I can make out, nor do they understand more of God's will than the devil tells them. The command which the chiefs have over their people extends no further than that the Indians build the houses for the chiefs, till their fields, give them as many of their women as they want, and wash gold out of the rivers for them, with which they trade with their neighbors. The chiefs select their captains in the wars, and accompany them in battle. In all things these Indians show little constancy. They are ashamed of nothing, nor do they know what virtue is, while in malice they are very cunning one against the other. Beyond this province, to the eastward, are the mountains which are called Andes, broken up into rugged peaks. On the other side the Indians say there is a beautiful valley through which a river flows, and where, according to the stories of these natives of Arma, there are great riches and many Indians. In all these parts the women bring forth without the assistance of midwives, and after bringing forth they go to wash in a river, doing the same to their offspring, nor do they suffer any evil consequence from so doing, and 50 of these women suffer less pain in bringing forth than one of our nation. Chapter 20. Of the province of Pakura, and of the manners and customs of the natives. Beyond the great province of Arma there is another, called Pakura, which contained 5,000 or 6,000 Indians when we first entered it with the captain Jorge Robledo. The language of the Indians in this province differs from that of Arma. The customs of the people are the same, except that these are a better disposed race, and that the women wear a small mantle to cover a certain part of their bodies, and the men do the same. This province is very fertile for the growth of maize and other products. They are not so rich in gold as those in their rear, nor are their houses so large, nor is the country so rough. A river flows through the province, but it has few tributary streams. Close to the house of the principal chief, whose name was Pamana, there was a wooden idol, the size of a tall man. Its face was turned towards the rising sun, and its arms were spread out. Every Tuesday the Indians sacrificed to the devil in this province of Pakura, and the same was done in that of Arma, according to what the Indians told us, but I was unable to learn whether the victims were their own countrymen, or prisoners taken in war. Among the houses of the chiefs they have stout canes planted in a circle so as to form a cage, from which those who are put in cannot possibly escape. The captives taken in war are put into this cage and very well fed, and when they are fat, they are taken out on days of festivity, killed with great cruelty, and eaten. I saw several of these cages or prisons, in the province of Arma. It is worthy of note, that when they wish to kill any of these unfortunates, with the intention of eating them, they make them kneel down and bow their heads, and then give them a blow on the back of the neck with such effect that they never speak again. I have seen what I describe, and the victim never speaks, even to ask for mercy, nay, some even laugh when they are killed, which is a very marvelous thing, but it proceeds more from bestiality than from courage. The heads of those who are eaten are stuck on the points of the canes. Passing this province, we reached a lofty plain, which is well peopled and covered with large houses. This district is called Pozo, and the people speak the same language, and have the same customs as those of Arma.